On this week's The News, is it 1996 asks people old enough to remember what Winston Peters was saying in 1996. The Prime Minister loses his free rides. The bugs you don't expect to see in a hospital make a comeback. And sexy people join forces for a good cause. All that and more in this week's The News. Hello there, kia ora, welcome to this week's The News. I'm Paul, and I'm the real Paul, not the fake one who somehow amassed 10,000 TikTok followers pretending to be me. So if you come across paul.barlow312 on TikTok, please report them, because they blocked me so I can't. Anyway, the Prime Minister, seen here catching a ride to Kmart at the small cost of 20 million Kiwis aren't an ATM dollars, said he can excuse racism, but tax changes are a step too far when deciding who to rule out as potential coalition partners, with talks from Opportunity, while ruling in New Zealand first after its 297th racist comment from its leadership team. In the continuing fallout to racist ramblings from the Foreign Affairs Minister, Winston Peters, seen here in a cartoon from 1996 when he was campaigning on stopping an imaginary Asian invasion, Peters' comments aimed at Chinese-born New Zealander Dr. Lawrence Yunnan in the House this week that went unchallenged by the Speaker is having a totally foreseeable fallout. Public pressure has been increasing on the Prime Minister to actually reprimand the leader of the party whose anti-trans bathroom bill he supported without question or as part of a coalition agreement. Said a spokesperson for Luxon, who would have thought that the party that was frothing at the mouth to remove treaty clauses, Te Reo Māori, and demand that we recognise English as an official language, while you still pay the highest prices ever for rent, food, power, petrol, everything else, and they do nothing about it, would also keep saying racist things that he's been saying for the past 40 years. The comments from Peters have led to widespread calls for his removal as Foreign Affairs Minister, international headlines bringing the country's reputation into disrepute, and condemnation from migrant communities here. The Prime Minister, however, remains steadfast in his doing nothing but complaining about other parties' tax proposals and telling people he's happy to give racism another 3 years in power to win in November. The latest Ipsos Issues Monitor poll has been released, and it can be summed up with one graphic they helpfully added to the data, showing national above an empty list of issues voters think it is best suited to handle. Respondents to the poll saw Labour as being best suited to deal with 16 of the top 20 issues that those same respondents identified, including cost of living, healthcare, the economy, unemployment, transport, and education. National was considered the best at dealing with crime, with Police Minister Mark Mitchell, seen here auditioning for a role in the upcoming Smile horror film sequel, saying, "It just goes to show that if we lie enough over and over about bringing down ram raid numbers, some people will actually believe us eventually." The Ipsos poll doesn't track who most are likely going to win the election votes from the respondents, but which issues the respondents feel are most important, and which party they see as being the best to deal with them. Despite claiming to be constantly waging a war on woke, disgraced former Minister Stuart Nash, seen here trying to be cool by doing the viral 6-7 trend in front of a crowd of people who remember when cars had flag bearers walking in front of them, has officially stepped down as a New Zealand First candidate following mounting public outrage over a leaked text message disparaging a new Mother MP, a concession that wokeness might just mean not being a dickhead to others. Critics and equality advocates condemned the misogynistic rhetoric, highlighting a toxic culture within political circles that frequently targets women in public life. While Nash's resignation attempts to stem the damage, many argue it highlights deep-seated institutional problems rather than a genuine shift in accountability. The fallout continues to haunt the party's leadership as they scramble to distance themselves from the controversy while claiming that they aren't really woke, with a distraction plan that includes seemingly being more racist to remind their core voters they really aren't woke. Hard-pressed New Zealand families are facing yet another financial squeeze as stubborn inflation figures compound with just-announced new trade tariffs from US President Donald Trump, seen here finding out how to convince voters that a $40,000 trip to eat a dessert on a mountain wasn't a waste of money from an expert. While working-class households struggle to afford basic necessities, critics argue the government's refusal to implement progressive taxation or wealth redistribution leaves ordinary people bearing the brunt of global economic shocks. The red meat export sector is bracing for severe disruptions, yet little targeted support is being offered to protect vulnerable regional workers. Economists warn that the current fiscal strategies are failing to protect everyday citizens from corporate profiteering and global market volatility. In response, the National Party has taken to posting misleading claims twice as often on Facebook about the Labour and Greens to distract voters from real issues. Public Service Commissioner Sir Brian Roche, seen here trying to dig out the build-up of earwax he's suffering from, ordered the Public Service Association to pull its Change the Government campaign postcards from state sector workplaces. Apparently public servants are allowed to suffer under government funding cuts, but holding a piece of card that says they dislike it crosses a constitutional line. Instead, he suggested the PSA just make Facebook posts with holiday pics instead of relying on a postal service that's currently in decline. Workplace Relations Minister Brooke Van Velden, seen here cosplaying one of the workers she knows may die with the rollback of workplace safety laws she enforced, celebrated passing the Employment Leave Bill, claiming it solves the long-standing Holidays Act headache. Namely, it entitled the peasants at the coalface to holidays. The PSA estimates that the new leave laws could leave more than 200,000 workers worse off as changes move to an accrual system. Said Van Velden of the changes, as a soon-to-be former MP in a party that gets handed millions from the richest people in the country, I'm sorted, so I'm not sure what everyone else could be complaining about. Associate Justice Minister Nicole McKee, seen here in the latest Mockbuster Avengers ripoff where she fights off woke with machine guns she secretly had buried in her backyard, successfully pushed through the new arms bill. Because when Kiwis are struggling with the cost of living and crumbling public infrastructure, the obvious priority is making sure licensed firearm owners have a much smoother, lower friction experience when it comes to buying weapons. While hospitals beg for resources, the government announced it's officially shopping for long-range, one-way strike drones for the New Zealand Defence Force. Said a spokesperson for the Defence Force, "This is the only way that we can stop the Prime Minister from using us like a taxi to get to Kmart." Well, it's this in to invest in unmanned aerial devices and maybe use them on Kmart. Nurses have highlighted systemic underfunding by exposing that Auckland hospital wards are currently dealing with flea infestations and patients literally falling out of bed while trying to swat cockroaches. But don't worry, the government efficiency drives are working exactly as intended. Data from the New Zealand Nurses Union shows 90% of all shifts across Waitemata, Capital and Coast and Hutt Valley mental health wards are running below safe margins 90% of the time. Half of all children hospital wards are below staffing targets 20% of the times, and OIA data shows hundreds of vacant frontline and allied health roles sitting in administrative limbo for months. Said the Minister of Health, Simeon Brown, seen here getting ready to floor it past a primary school to see how many kids can dodge him in time. If people have a problem with the way that we're trying to run the health sector, I suggest they stay home and pray the sickness away instead. The government has seemingly decided the only Plunket they care about is the middle-aged man in his basement yelling at clouds about woke, as the New Zealand Nurses Organisation this week criticised the government's funding and broken coalition promises for increased funding for whānau āwhina Plunket. Part of New Zealand First coalition agreement included dedicated funding increases for the organisation that didn't happen in the 2026 budget. Plunket nurses see roughly 80% of all newborn babies in the country, and Plunket nurses, whose pay equity claim was dismissed last year by the coalition, earn 10 to 25% less than their hospital-based nursing counterparts doing comparable work, leading to a brain drain as experienced nurses leave Plunket for hospital roles simply to keep up with the increasing cost of living being dealt with by making sure English is an official language, increasing workloads for remaining Plunket nurses. Said a spokesperson for New Zealand First, well, to be honest, we couldn't make it out. It was an incoherent rambling.
Like you didn't understand the part that's insane.
Firefighters took their fight to Parliament via a private member's bill to ease the ACC burden for those developing occupational cancer from fighting literal infernos. Because battling toxic smoke isn't hard enough, you also have to file 3 forms in triplicate to prove it caused your illness. Aotearoa New Zealand is one of the few countries that doesn't already recognise the overarching risks of cancer to firefighters in legislation. Said a spokesperson for the union, working machines and recognition that what we do is dangerous seems like pretty basic requests. Where'd we have to keep fighting for them? The head of the FMA was placed on leave amid an urgent review into quote-unquote cultural concerns at the regulator. That's right, it's just another day of high-stakes corporate drama in Wellington's executive suites while the rest of us watch the interest rates. Political commentators have called out National's sudden charm offensive targeting female voters, pointing out the stark contrast their election year pitch and their actual coalition policies to distance itself from the sexism of a candidate its coalition partner was promoting. After cancelling pay equity processes and 33 claims for female-led industries, repealing fair pay agreements, removing early childhood education subsidies for a complicated family boost rebate scheme, and pushing through the harmful definition of gender bill and having made a number of sexist comments themselves this term, National's campaign manager, Simeon Brown, seen here feigning shock at being called out for repeatedly lying on social media to win votes, said, "Once we realised over half the voters were women, we figured we should at least let them think they are important enough to make decisions." And finally, conservative Christians around the country are screaming in concern as Green Party candidate Tanya Waikato runs a campaign to get people to enrolled to vote this year with thirst traps. Said Waikato of the initiative, "We've been looking at ways to find the missing million people who didn't vote last time, and this has been getting great reactions, including the desired effect of helping encourage people to check their enrolment details for the election." However, a bunch of evangelical Christian leaders have called the move. Actually, you know what? I don't need the both sides people who tell you that their congregation has to pay them for them to be successful or spread conspiracies while importing American culture wars. If the side of people who have clearly worked hard and are proud of the outcomes that they've achieved by working hard and want to use it for good upset them, then that's a them problem. We should celebrate their success by heading to vote.nz and checking our enrolment details. For those considering the Māori roll, cut-off between the rolls is August 6. And if you're not enrolled by October 25, or pre-enrolled if you turn 18 in the early voting period, you will not be permitted to vote this year. So please go and check those details. Right, that's it for this week's news. Remember to join me on Sunday morning on YouTube for a new show looking at media context and to encourage others to check their enrolment details. Ka kite anō, live long, prosper, be one with the force, and we'll catch you all next time.